Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for tonight, March 27th, 2024. Thanks for coming. Those in attendance are, I'm going to have to look because I don't remember your last names. All right, Lane Jenkins, Amanda Jorgensen, Tyler Moss, myself, Lorraine Patterson, and Sean Hoff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Mason and Matt are absent today. And Tyler, you are on the legislative thought. Sorry about that. Or the prayer.
Okay,
Is that
well,
still good?
sure.
Okay.
Just for those that don't know, I believe the Centerville City is doing their green waste cleanup right now. So you can go on the Centerville City's website. It has hours that you can, do clippings and trees, bushes, whatnot at the Centerville Park. And so, it's free.
It's nice. I
It's
used it
really
last
nice.
Saturday.
Yeah, so did we. There's a big group of us in our neighborhood that did this kind of a project, so I just throw that out there so that you know it's available.
When is the final day, Tyler?
I'd have to look, but I want to say it is this Saturday.
Yeah. And it's on the northwest corner, right?
Yeah, like right off of Frontage Road.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
But then the Easter eggs this Saturday, but I think that's on the east side. So hopefully they don't,
They're gonna put the Easter eggs in between all the
all the debris.
all the debris. Trying to find them now.
Yeah.
That would
Hardest
be a
year
good idea.
ever.
Do you have, want to say the prayer? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to say the prayer too?
That'd be great.
Okay, sounds great. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this Wednesday night that we can meet as a city commission, planning commission. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to serve the great city of Centerville. We're thankful for those that could come tonight and be with us, and we pray that we can all be edified together to learn more about the Centerville City planning, zoning requirements, and the different rules and regulations that are in place to have a beautiful city. We're grateful for thy wisdom and thy patience and thy power in our lives, and we pray that we can always be mindful of thee and all of our decisions and how we interact with others. We pray for thy Spirit to be with us, and we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first item of business tonight is public meeting, and it is for zone text amendment CZC 12.55.100, fences and walls, and this is a legislative decision. And I'd like to turn the time over to staff for your report or your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Patterson. So like Lorraine said, this is a zoning code text amendment application, and there's a typo on the agenda. It's actually CZC 12.55.110, fences and walls. That's the section we'll be looking at. The applicant is Richard Jensen, and this item you've seen before. It was previously tabled at the January 24th meeting. But since we have a couple of new members, I wanted to take a second to remind you that zoning code text amendments are legislative decisions, and legislative decisions are based on the reasonably debatable standard of review. So when you consider a legislative decision, the Planning Commission should consider what action will reasonably promote the public interest, conserve the values of other properties, avoid incompatible development, encourage appropriate use and development, and promote the general welfare. And then the Planning Commission's purpose in a zoning code text amendment review is to hold a public hearing and to make a recommendation to the City Council. We've already held the public hearing for this item, and since it was tabled, we don't have to hold another one, so that's why it's just a public meeting tonight. Following the presentation from staff and comments from the applicant, the Planning Commission then can make a recommendation through a motion to the City Council to approve the request, approve with conditions, deny the request, or table the matter for further information and documentation. So just in a review from last time, the petitioner is Richard Jensen. And he desires to amend the zoning ordinance regarding fences and walls to accommodate a retaining wall and fence combination that he would like to construct on the east side of his lot. So the applicant came in for a building permit in October of 2023 for a retaining wall. And in our conversations with that application, he explained to us that he has a current retaining wall that's failing, and he'd like to replace it with a new retaining wall and then put a 6-foot fence on top of that. Unfortunately, during our review, the combination of the retaining wall and the fence exceeded the current standard. So we initially denied his permit, and he came back a couple different times and resubmitted different versions of his plans, trying to accommodate what he wanted with city code, but ultimately we couldn't come to a plan that achieved both of those things. So in December, he applied for a zoning code text amendment, and in January, you all reviewed it and tabled it. The current code, CZC 12.55.110, currently states, height of fence and walls. No fence, wall, or other similar structure exceeding 6 feet in height shall be erected in any rear or side yard except for accessory buildings and structures permitted by this title, except as provided below. When a difference in grade exists on either side of a fence or wall, the height of the fence or wall shall be measured from 1, the average elevation of the finished grade of adjoining properties at the fence line, or 2, if excavated or filled, the native elevation. So in this case, there is a difference between Mr. Jensen and his neighbor. There's a grade difference of about 4 feet. And his overall project has a height of 10 feet. So after you take the average elevation of the difference in grade, the final height calculation is 8 feet, which is an overage of 2 feet. So the applicant is proposing to differentiate between non-structurally engineered walls and structurally engineered walls, amend the allowed fence height from 6 to 7 feet for non-structurally engineered walls, typically chain link wood or vinyl, and 8 feet for structurally engineered walls, typically concrete or CMU. So since our January 24th meeting, the applicant has amended his application to include some suggestions regarding the staff's concerns that were listed in that staff report. And then he's also compiled a list of the standards for fences and walls in other Davis County cities. So staff acknowledges that this request has brought up some concerns or questions regarding the current code, but we still don't feel that this is a comprehensive review or amendment. It seems to be addressing one issue for one problem, and we feel that a more comprehensive review with the input from the city engineer, the building official, other departments would be more appropriate. So to summarize, the city staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council denial of this request because it doesn't fully consider all of the positive and negative impacts for the entire city. And we also recommend that maybe you put this on your list of goals this year to look at this whole code and amend it fully instead of just line by line, like a couple of the applications we've had recently. So we've provided sample motions in the staff report for your convenience, but do you have any questions for staff?
You said that it was going to be, that you would recommend going to the city engineer. Why, I guess my question is, why didn't that happen before we had a meeting here?
We just didn't have time to get his input.
Okay. Just wondering in regards to like prolonging it for him, that would be in my mind, I guess, a good option to be able to do before, because, I mean, if that could be something that we suggest on our side and possibly denying it, is that a possibility?
Well, it's kind of a balance of addressing an application before us versus, prioritizing a project that might take quite a bit of time and research for staff.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes in the past, maybe we have tabled things, but it's not like, it does, this application issue would likely require quite a bit of research and analysis, and it's not something that staff has the time right now to respond to in an adequate time frame. And so we're still just pursuing letting the applicant pursue this.
So the applicant would work with the city engineer, is that what you're saying then?
I think the recommendation from staff is just to deny this because we haven't, analyzed all the issues and it's not really ready for approval, but putting it on the city's list, so it wouldn't even be applicant driven. It would be, hey, this application has actually raised something legitimate that the city should, even staff acknowledges, the city should review and address in our code eventually. It's just that we do not have the time right now with the budget session and the general plan and implementing the subdivision ordinance and that type of thing. So, but acknowledging that yes, at some point that this should be on our list of things to do as a city, not even applicant driven.
You mentioned the applicant put in the other cities' ordinances. How much different are they than ours?
They're pretty similar. I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time going over them, but they're very similar to ours. I think they have a couple different things that are unique to their city, but like the 6-foot height max is very common. So,
It's just measured a different way,
yeah.
and that makes all the difference.
And some cities have different solutions with the interface with, like the block wall or the retention walls. So we could do a survey to see what that interface looks like and see if there's solutions that are different, especially in slope areas. Maybe where there is a slope that's from property to property, it'd be more appropriate. But again, without doing a full survey and evaluation of cities in similar circumstances, it's hard to know what solutions might work, and then it could be uniquely modified to fit Centerville City as an entirety, aside from just this singular instance, right? And that's the challenge for staff is we would like to be able to have that full survey and fully understand all the different ways that might look to get the best solution for the city as a whole rather than a targeted solution at this time.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff?
Just if you go down to like point 3 on that, that zoning ordinance, it says that the planning commission may approve a fence, wall, or similar structure not to exceed 10 feet in a rear area or side area, and then it goes on and lists all these different zones. But then it has a caveat, as part of a site plan review or amended site plan.
Yeah, so this area is not in one of the zones that's listed. So that wouldn't apply here for Mr. Jensen's lot.
Sure, that's what I was wondering.
That's kind of what we did, if you remember the Hive. They came in for a fence amendment a couple months ago, probably almost a year now, but we did this for them because they were in one of those zones that's listed. And the Dave Bell's auto that we did a couple months ago, it was the same thing, but they're in a different zone.
Okay. So is there no other, I mean, we've done a pretty good review of all the ordinances and we just can't find any way to provide a variance? Because I mean, you probably have walked across, just on streets and seen a low drop, and the fence is 6 feet in the back pursuant to the code, but then because the road or elevation difference, I mean, the fence only comes up to your chest at like 3 feet, so you can easily see over, or vice versa if it's, so I don't think that it's I think this one particular lot is not so unique that we can't say it's the only place in Centerville that it exists like this.
Right.
So is there no other easy variance or?
The best solution in a situation like this is writing code that solves the solution and resolves the situations you're talking about comprehensively, right? So finding the right solution and putting that code in place, I mean, it can be a high priority, something that can be addressed, but we need to figure out what that solution is to qualify the very situation you're doing, rather than say variance here, variance here, variance here, variance here. Because the minute you start that practice, that's what you're gonna have to do, right?
Everyone, yeah.
So the best solution is to be comprehensive with a zone or code change that solves all those situations and makes there be more flexibility in the future for similar situations that may arise. I think we're saying as staff, we recognize the issue, and we recognize there's probably similar issues in the community. So it's probably better for us to find the right solutions with code that everybody can get behind with planning commission and city council that solves these problems citywide.
How long would this process go?
I mean,
In
what
order to
do you
change the
think,
code?
a couple of months? I don't know what historically does it take for a code change?
Probably a couple months. I mean, we are in the middle of budget and general plan, so that probably would take precedent, but I mean, as long as the city engineer and other departments could work with us, depending on their caseload, I think we could get one to you by the middle of summer, maybe,
Yeah.
so.
And then back to the variance issue, like in this case, if you were to, you know, go down the variance route, has the applicant already done that, one? And then two, if it is, you know, cinder block type wall or foundation wall and then 6 feet above, is that a permit scenario that you would look at for a particular variance in this case?
I don't know.
So
I guess those are two
they
questions,
haven't applied for a variance. Variances are very strict. They go to the Board of Adjustments. You have to meet 5 criteria. And I'm not sure that this case would fall into that, but that would be up to the Board of Adjustments to determine.
Yeah, in my opinion, it doesn't, we wouldn't suggest the applicant seek a variance because it doesn't meet the criteria.
I think it
for
would be
variance.
challenging. Self-imposed circumstances usually don't qualify for variances. They're usually something that's tied to the geography of the lot or something very unique, not something that could be financially imposed. I get it, and I'm sympathetic to a dilapidated structure that may be challenged in its integrity. But again, that would be probably viewed, but even in the variance review, as a self-imposed issue, not something that the lot itself is creating.
To your question about permits, though, the retaining wall, if it's over 3.5 feet, it does require a building permit. And then anything on top of that would require a permit and structural engineering to make sure that it was up to code, so.
Are there any further questions for staff? No? Okay, so we would like to give you some time. Mr. Jensen?
Thank you so much for allowing me just a little time.
Absolutely.
So, as I explained last time, and some of you weren't here, our lot slopes to the north and to the west, and so we want to build a retaining wall and a wall of concrete because my neighbor has lots of trees, and the trees limbs fall down and destroy whatever's underneath them. So we'd like something that wouldn't be destroyed. So concrete walls need to step down as they go, you know, downhill. And so our fence wouldn't be very high in a lot of places along the fence if we step it. So we start at 6 feet and then it becomes 4 feet at the low part, 6 feet, and then 4 feet or less. So that's the issue. And so part of my research, I did go through and address to some extent the staff's concerns from last time. And I don't know, should I go through all these or?
They were provided,
It's in the
so.
packet. I mean, you're welcome to comment on them, but it is in their packet.
So do you have any questions about this? I mean, I think I addressed the city's, or the staff's concerns. Got some definitions from Bountiful City Code. Talked about the available heights of different fences that really may not apply to this, but I think it's informative. Review of adjacent cities. So I looked at 6 cities in South Davis County, front yards and backyards. So backyards, 4 out of the 6 have the same height restriction as Centerville, including Centerville. 2 of them, Bountiful and Farmington, allow 8-foot fences. Bountiful's is unique in that it allows 6 foot of a non-see-through fence and 2 feet of a see-through fence. So you could have kind of a hybrid fence of 8 feet. The grade differential issue, Centerville's in the minority amongst those 6 cities, Centerville and North Salt Lake. The rest of the cities start the height of a measurement of the fence at the high grade point of the 2 grade differentials. So in my case, the fence would be allowed to go from my neighbor's height of 4 feet above my height, 6 feet above that. So interesting there. And then I think someone mentioned last time that the IRC, the International Residential Code, addresses fence, but it does not. It addresses walls related to structures. So I looked at that, and then I gave a list of proposed changes. One is the one that Whitney mentioned at first. The other option was to just go 8-foot fence without a differentiation between structural and non-structural fences. The final one would be to take an average of 6 foot, which would also benefit me because then I could take the whole average of the fence along my whole property. The problem with that one is that it would be really hard to determine what the average is, because you'd have to take the area of the wall, the whole length of the lot, and then divide it by the length. It'd be difficult to figure out. You could, but it'd be hard. And then the last one is this grade differential thing. So, are there any questions? I think hopefully I've covered everything.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jensen? Looking at all, you were very thorough. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you for allowing us to come.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And there is no public hearing on it, like Whitney said, because it was tabled. So then it just goes to discussion with us. Right? Okay. Have any thoughts on anything?
I mean, this is a situation that in my line of work, regularly I get people that call me all the time and ask me for things that it's just like, oh yeah, that's such a simple thing. I understand why you think that this is easy. And from their perspective, it seems very easy, and I sympathize with you, but from my perspective, one change can affect 1,500 different things down the road. And the amount of times I've done that one simple thing for them and I regretted it, I mean, I can't count how many times that's happened to me. So, I mean, I just say that to say, like, I sympathize that this is annoying, and I wish that I could just give them a solution immediately, but it sounds like we can at least make the recommendation to get this done, the code change this year, which, isn't a super long time. It's not like we're asking, anyone to wait years to build a fence, but, I mean, that's the only thing I would have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I guess I'm still trying to figure out the average. Can you explain the average? There was a.
Like of the current code?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there was an example, and it showed a picture, and I was looking at that. I'm still trying to make sense of that compared to how it relates with his fence.
Okay, so if you had a flat piece of property, you would put a 6-foot fence at the property line.
Okay.
So from the base of the flat property to the top of the fence would be 6 feet.
But
Okay.
with this example, we've got 4 feet.
Right.
Where it's flat up to where it starts at the 6
Right.
feet. So we have a total of 10 feet of overall.
Right, right. So the way that the current code says that we calculate that is we would take the average of the difference of grade, which is 4 feet, so that would be 2, is the average. And then add that to the 6-foot fence, you get 8.
Because we're saying the top of the fence is, or the top of this wall is where the grade starts in the other lot?
Yeah,
on this
yeah, so the
example?
grade of the neighboring lot would start at the top, the grade of his lot would start at the bottom.
Okay.
And then we would take the average of that, which is 2, and then he's proposing the 6-foot fence, so that's where we get the 8-foot.
Right.
If someone was proposing, a 4-foot fence, then we would get a 6-foot total.
So what's the highest or highest fence total we could do with his project?
6, a total of 6.
A total of 6?
Yes.
So he may have like a 6-foot retaining wall in some areas based on how it goes.
Right,
down.
so then he couldn't, so then he could
couldn't
put,
up any fence?
well, depending on what with the average elevation, he could put a 4-foot fence on top of it if the retaining wall and the average elevation was still 2 feet.
Okay.
So with the average elevation and whatever you put on top of that,
It can only be
it can
6
only
feet.
add up to 6 feet, no matter if it's retaining wall or fence.
So a retaining wall in this situation can only be a 6-foot retaining wall? Is
If,
that-
if you just want to do a retaining wall, yeah.
okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just thinking for his eastern neighbor, he could put up this, this retaining wall, and there's just this huge drop off.
Yeah.
I see huge issues
Yeah.
for safety there.
And then there are,
For their neighbor. I mean,
Yeah.
little 2-year-old boy goes, kicks the ball off the side and there's no fence there because of code. That, I don't know, just the
Yeah.
smell test does not, it doesn't pass the safety. thing.
that's why you see codes in the packet, just like he noted, where the higher grade is where the fence can go up.
Right,
And that's the solution, and the city I worked in, that's what the solution allowed for.
okay.
So that's what I was trying to say earlier, we could explore solutions like that and then try to cater them to what we think is in the best interest of residents, especially more on the hillside areas of the city where.
Right,
it'd
the
be more
hillside
appropriate.
overlay where he's at. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand from his backyard,
Yeah.
it could be like a 6-foot retaining wall and a 6-foot
Yeah.
fence, so he's got a 12-foot monster thing.
Because you got
Right.
the interface of his wall
I under-
versus their fence.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, like for his neighbor on the east,
They'd only get a 6-foot
they'd only
fence.
see a 6-foot
Yeah.
fence, but that's what we get for building as city
On slopes.
on slopes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a very common problem, and that's usually a solution, is you go whatever's the higher grade for the fence.
Okay, so that would be maybe a possible code solution.
Yeah. Another thing we could talk about is different, like, separating fences and walls, because right now they're combined.
That's true, too.
So we could
Oh,
talk
that's a good
about
point.
separating
Definition for
fences and
Right,
walls.
right.
Yeah, that seems to make sense, because there's different requirements. If you're retaining versus just putting up a fence, in my mind, there's different requirements.
Yeah, because I think retaining, I mean, you
terms of
should be able to
engineering.
retain
Yeah.
what's in front of you.
Yeah.
I mean, a combination of the two sounds best.
Right, right.
And then just last time I was here and we discussed this, if I remember right, his neighbor could build a 6-foot fence, no problem.
No, the code says, no matter what side it says, let me pull this back up. So when a difference in grade exists on either side of a fence or wall, so same with the other neighbor.
His neighbor wanted to build a fence, they could only build a 4-foot fence.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you see why that's problematic, you're right there, problematic.
What if they tiered it though?
He had a plan that tiered it a little bit, but it still didn't get it to where he wanted it to be.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, we could tier it, but,
But you'd have to tier it and then go out a certain amount before you drop down 6 feet or whatever the.
well, some of it was like a 2-foot fence. I mean, that's not gonna work, so.
And is this assuming the fence is built on the property line? What if the fence is set back?
Well, it doesn't specify, I mean, it just says when a different in grade exists on either side of a fence or wall, so it doesn't say where the fence or wall is
So we
put.
need to define maybe what a side of the fence means and some of those other terms of zones,
Yeah,
even
how
with the
much.
code to make it more clear.
Yeah.
Because this is even come up, what about an internal fence? Are we regulating now fences in people's backyards? We don't want to be in that business, so you gotta kind of figure out what zones.
But the average grade would be
Yeah.
the same at some point, I would think, if it was internal,
Yeah.
like a side yard. Yeah, and I think that it does raise a lot of complications, and it does impact a number of different areas in the code. And I can say that, the council could direct staff to reprioritize and say, hey, we want this to be a priority, and, so if the elected officials say, staff, you're gonna do this, then we reprioritize.
And you've already got zonal fence standards even in section 3, so you could do some zonal fence standards too where appropriate, Areas with hillside slopes are under this terminology, and then where it's flatter and they don't have that interface, maybe it's more of the standard code as it's written or
Right,
something.
I think that's
Yeah, I
a great
like
idea
that.
because
Zone
the
differentiation.
hillside overlay, the people up there, I think could go for a different code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're protecting people down here where if someone can't go and bring in a bunch of fill and raise their grade artificially and then somehow get it 8
Sure,
foot, right? You're
sure.
creating- But you're allowing those that are on slopes that genuinely are there to
I
have
think
that
that's
benefit.
a great idea.
Well, I like the fact that we've identified a problem, big time. We identified it last time, it's still existing. I think I agree with what Whitney said, that we need to get with the city planners, probably engineers, city engineering guy, Park and Rec maybe even, and change or figure out what the best thing would be for the overall citizenship of the city, what we're doing with safety and what we're doing that works for individuals as well. And I know that and I had talked to you about this and then also did my own research on it. So as far as our position and what we can do, we can't change that, right? We can't amend it. We can approve, or we can say, or I mean, we can suggest that things get changed, and we want to get them changed. It looks like they need to be, again, with the fence and the wall and all of that, so that we can make it accommodating, but also the way that it needs to be, right? Not just for one, but for everybody. And we totally sympathize with where you're at completely. But I believe that, so we are here to evaluate the effects, right? But we're not allowed to change anything, right? We can just recommend that we want it on the table and that we want it addressed, and we want to look into it more for definitions and for all of those things that you guys have already discussed and that everybody brought to the table. So those are my thoughts.
So one of the suggestions is we can table it, for this amending regarding this zoning ordinance until such time as ... right? There's an option for that. So what I'm hearing is would this be something that internal staff would have to kind of get their arms around and then come back to the planning commission to say, okay, we've talked with our internal folks and these are our recommendations for the modified zoning language?
I mean, it's a possibility, I don't know a time frame. Are they required after, they can only table it for so long? Do you know if there's a duration of tabling? Or is it somewhat
Well, I think
indefinite?
staff's recommendation at this point is, again, this would be a fairly significant research project that we don't have the bandwidth right now to handle. Sometimes if it was something easy, but this is an applicant-driven application, and right now, staff's recommendation is that a potential 12-foot tall fence and retaining wall combination is not in the best interest of the city. Now, it doesn't mean that we couldn't come up with some other language to address that as we've discussed, but I think that the better route would be to recommend the denial to the city council, but add all of this, that it's raised a good point, and suggest that, that this be a city-initiated project and task staff to look at it. And then you can see if the council's on board with that as well, too, because ultimately they have to be inclined to want to change something as well, since it's a policy issue. So like I said, it's a balancing thing. I think sometimes we have taken some of these applicant-driven applications and tried to make them more palatable or, in the best interest of the community, but this one has a lot of moving parts. So it's hard to say, yeah, let's take this and, rewrite quite a bit of our code.
I see that it addresses, the way that he proposed it, that it addresses basically one issue and that it doesn't address all of the other things that need to be fixed.
Yes, I
right?
think
All the
it's
sundry
been mentioned, it
pieces.
could raise a lot of other issues.
Right.
Like you said, people having 12.
Even the discussion we had at the last planning commission meeting, it's fencing discussion. So again, to be more comprehensive, that allows us, we do comprehensively, to tackle both in the same analysis, right?
Yes.
So again, even though those are both applicant-driven, that allows us to be maybe and maybe even see and avoid a third or fourth applicant for other circumstances. See, getting on to what Lisa's point is, so we can be more comprehensive, looking at everything. Maybe even do a survey of the city and see some scenarios, like have been said both at this meeting and last meeting, where you see some of the situations that are being asked to be changed tonight. Maybe either those can be pointed out to staff, or we can drive through the city and do a survey and see even other similar situations, again, to avoid this in the future by doing an upgrade.
Right.
So procedurally, this issue hasn't gone to the city council yet because it was previously tabled, is that right?
Correct.
And then regardless of what we vote tonight, it'll go to the city council and then they'll have similar discussion.
If you table it, it won't. If you recommend to deny it or recommend to approve it, it will go to city council.
Okay. So
And
if
they'll
we-
do the whole
okay.
thing, yeah.
And then, once it goes to the city council, then they can entertain these concepts and say, okay, well, let's just do it now, or let's go back and.
They might even, approve or deny and then make a directive in either case that staff try to resolve these outstanding issues that are through these discussions.
Okay.
In fact, I have a feeling next week when the other fence issue comes forward, we're already going to be primed to have the very conversation you're talking about, even in light of that. And then if this comes behind it with whatever recommendation, we're going to have even further discussion about it. So you're kind of the first wave of exactly what the council will go through again, depending on what your recommendation is.
Right. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions, anything else you want to discuss? All right, would anybody like to make a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we recommend denial of the request, and that we also put in there that staff works on making that amendment to, fix the ordinance, to make it more, safe for everyone, and, yeah.
Okay.
I'll
Would anybody,
second that.
you'll second that?
Is that based on the findings set forth in the staff report?
Oh, sorry.
Using the
Am I supposed
final.
to be reading things exactly?
I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to recommend to the city council denial of the request for Richard Jensen for a zoning code text amendment regarding CZC 1255-110 fences and walls with the following reasons for action. The planning commission finds that the application does not adequately consider the potential positive and negative impacts of increasing the allowable fence or wall height. The planning commission finds that a more comprehensive ordinance amendment than what is proposed in the application is needed for CZZ 1255-110. Therefore, the planning commission finds that the request for a zoning code text amendment regarding CZZ 1255-110 fences and walls should not be positively recommended to the city council. Do you second it?
And then are we wanting to, before, I don't know, procedure, I guess we'll do Robert's Rules of Order later, but do we want to add just a bullet point 4 that we're recommending that staff, comes back with their recommendation,
To that
further
point.
recommendations and findings as to how to kind of correct this?
I think that goes into Article 2 of the findings. It could just be a subordinate clause in Article 2
Okay,
with the directive that staff work on
yeah,
solutions to the
Rectify the
fencing
situation.
discussion here in town.
perfect, yeah. I think I would second that motion if that's included in the original motion.
And if we could put like a sense of urgency on it as well?
I mean,
Well, they are
Hire an
trying to
extra
do
Lisa, or
this.
hire an extra Whitney, huh?
We can sure ask the city council how they would like to proceed, if they'd like to make it a priority, or if it's going to the bottom of the
Or
list.
just like mention the idea.
So, yeah.
I would like to see it addressed sooner than later, because I have a feeling it's coming up more and more, where we've already seen 2 in 2 months.
Yeah.
There's issues there, clearly.
Well, and then like later tonight, we'll talk about our goals, so maybe we want to put this on, one of our top goals and try to get that
Yeah.
resolved, so.
So at this point, then I say that Lane made a motion, right, to deny, and it was seconded by Tyler, right? So that passed as a denial.
You need to call for a vote.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm learning.
And then Amanda read it and
But
modified.
then she
Yeah,
read
it's
it.
like- Yeah, Amanda, it's probably Amanda's
So
motion,
Amanda, then
seconded
there's
by
no
Tyler.
more
So I
motion.
guess, would Commissioner Jenkins defer to Amanda's motion?
Do you?
Commissioner, yes. I
Yes.
defer to Amanda's motion.
Okay, so Amanda's the first. Tyler,
Sorry.
you're still the second?
Second, yep.
Okay, all right, so let's vote individually.
Aye.
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 Okay, the commission agrees and voted to deny.
Yep.
Okay, all right, so thank you, everybody, thank you. And,
And the applicant, you will receive notice of when it goes to city council. We'll let you know, so you can come to that. Yeah.
thanks for coming. Okay, so we have another item of business. So our second item of business tonight is training on Robert's Rules of Order and professionalism and decorum. Yay!
Yay.
So we're
We
gonna
were
turn the
all
time over to you
All-stars
guys.
tonight with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to have a little training, and so I thought I wanted to start with just the Robert's Rules of Order, which is our parliamentary procedure that we use to run our meetings. I do want to ask for some forgiveness. I have a really bad headache tonight, and so I'm not super sharp, so don't ask really hard questions.
Sorry, we were grilling you before, we apologize.
Well, we're all not super sharp. We were here until 11 o'clock last night on budget session. I'm kind of in the same boat she is. I haven't been the sharpest today either.
I need to get some snacks.
And we have another budget meeting tomorrow night, so.
Anyway, but I do really enjoy talking about Robert's Rules of Order. And so generally, in our code, our municipal code says that the planning commission and the city council are required to conduct their meetings in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, but it is, we just say in general, it's not technical. So for instance, you know, like rules of discovery or something in the court of law, we don't follow them to a T, but we try to use them as guidance, because Robert's rules can be get very technical and are often used for legislative bodies as well as, you know, any other kind of functioning body like commissions. So anyway, what I always like to say is, remember, Robert's Rules of Order are here to help set the framework and to make our meetings more efficient, not to hinder. So like when I see boards or, you know, like, oh, should we do this or this or this, it's just nicer to know the flow and, you know, try to get the sense of the motions and that type of thing and not get too bogged down in, you know, the details of the parliamentary procedure. But if you have specific questions, I'm always happy to talk about really what a motion to table is or a motion to postpone and that type of thing. So, which sometimes those come up. So on our Robert's Rules of Order, I do like to give a little bit of history because they have been around for a long, long, long time. And so when our country started with with our colonies, all the colonies had their own kind of ways that their legislatures were functioning, and they weren't the same. They were not consistent. And they all kind of based them on the English parliamentary procedure, which we know is way overcomplicated. So we tried to simplify them a little bit and, you know, bring them into the modern era. But it wasn't until about 1801 when Thomas Jefferson was still, he was the vice president, and he said, we need to get things more uniform. And so everyone knows the rules, and we're following this throughout, you know, the country for all of our legislatures. And so he came up with a set of rules. And then this Roberts rules didn't come into place until about 1873, and this Mr. Roberts was actually an engineer, but he was a very civil-minded person. He said, yeah, I think we can do better, and so he came up with these rules, and they just took off, because we have a lot of these, you know, boards and committees, and even now we have HOA, and, you know, we have our nonprofits. And so what I think is great, and one of the benefits of being on the Planning Commission, is you'll now have some experience and expertise in Robert's Rules. So no matter what you know, whatever kind of board that you're, I'm okay if they shut the door. Oh, I know.
You're okay with it?
Yeah.
Are you
It's-
going up the meeting?
It's a public meeting, as long as it's not locked.
I've always told never ever let the doors get shut in meetings.
Brant doesn't like it, but, I mean, you can, if it bothers you, but I think our,
Youth council?
the speakers are on out there as well, so they know everything we're talking about. Anyway, so you get to, you know, we use these, and they will, you know, for the rest of your life, you'll have this little skill of Robert's Rules of Order. So, let's see, the next one. Oh, yeah, and I always like to explain the why. You know, why do we have these rules? But they're really good rules to basically make sure that we have efficient meetings, and that we know we're going to have this kind of motion, and then we're going to have a second, and then we're going to discuss it. And so we always have the same procedure, and I think it provides for efficient meetings and also greater expectations. So, you know, when the public is here, they, you know, can see that we're following the same procedure for everyone, and it appears fair. And it also provides everybody to give, you know, some input at various times. But that's the other thing is, after the public hearing, their time is done. You know, and sometimes we mix that up, but if we, and this is where I try to emphasize it, actually better to follow the rules because people catch on, and if you're not following the rules, then it doesn't seem fair. Because, well, the last time they got to talk, when, you know, we were done with the public hearing, or if we have a motion on the table and people are still talking, it's really interrupts the planning commission's debate and dialogue, and also gets very circular, because now you're having a debate and dialogue, but now you've got a third party trying to weigh in on that debate and dialogue. And I was talking with Mike and Whitney after our last meeting and thinking, you know, I really want to be mindful of that too. Like, once you have a motion on the table, or when the planning commission is debating a motion, as staff, we need to be mindful to stay out of the debate as well. And I'm thinking about the cannabis one, because I think I had said something, and then later, you know, the applicant wanted to say something, and it just didn't seem fair that I get to lobby you and they don't. So I want to be really mindful once you start your debate and dialogue, unless, you know, you can ask staff specific questions, but, you know, we should really let you debate, unless I hear something that is not legal, or is not in our code, or is not a basis that we want in the record. And so those are the times when I will say, you know, that's not relevant to our decision tonight. Like, I need to correct the record. Otherwise, you know, applications that are before you, they may say, oh, even though that wasn't part of your motion, that was part of your debate. And so they're saying, look, you were biased, or you looked at things that were not relevant to the application, you know, and so those sorts of things. So that's why those might be when I would speak up, but otherwise we want to keep it for the planning commission.
So Lisa, what you're saying, and so this helps me too, so once they make a motion, that's when staff needs to stay out of it. When they make that motion, then there's some discussion afterward. Is that what you're saying? We stay out of that, but up to that point, we can add commentary if it seems like it's part of their dialogue or questioning, or should we even stay out of that?
Yeah, and it depends. I know Mason was talking about when to make the motion, because really under Robert's rules, you're supposed to make a motion and know that you have a second before we even spend time talking about it.
Yeah.
Because if there's not a motion and a second, we don't need to talk about it. That's why, number one, it provides for efficiency. Because if you don't have two people that think this is even worth talking about, then let's not talk about it. But once you have two. So it depends, and I don't mind letting you talk first, and that's when, you know, staff can
That's
talk
what I was
and
wondering.
weigh in.
Presentation, if they have questions before, but once they make the motion, that's kind of almost clearing, if you will, the arena where we sit more on the sidelines, then they debate internally.
Yeah, unless asked. So, you know,
Yeah.
because sometimes you will start talking and then you'll have some things, but I just realized that out of my own participation is sometimes you'll be debating and staff still putting in our sway when we've already said, you know what I mean? Like, we've already said it, so we need to let you debate.
Reopen you can move to, you make a motion to reopen the public hearing, right? At the same hearing, like tonight, if for some reason we needed to have further comment from the applicant and that hearing has already been closed.
Yeah, so the applicant is not necessarily part of the public hearing. So you don't technically need a motion to open or close a public hearing, but yes, sometimes the body, we have informally said, okay, do you want to reopen the public hearing? And sometimes we've done that.
Or alternatively, if you wanted, like, if there's more question after they're debating, they can invite the applicant to come up for more information.
Right, you can always invite the applicant back up, because you may have questions, you know. But what I'm saying is, and this is why maybe it's okay to discuss before you make a motion, because once you make a motion and then you invite the applicant up, what I'm saying is you've just lost the table. You're bringing a third party into your debate. You should be ready to make a motion and start talking about the pros and cons and that type of thing. And I do understand once you start talking, you think, oh, like just today you had a question about, well, remind me again about what's average, you know, what's the average slope? You know, maybe I would ask that question before you get into the motion, so that, you know, the planning commission can really debate, and, you know. And Again, I mean, I'm just saying, in general, it would be better to not have staff or others once the planning commission is debating.
Well, and it makes sense, because then the perception from the public at large too is that somehow we're getting into it. And we should-
Exactly, we're all making the decision, and the applicant gets to sway you, well, and I have seen it. Like, the planning commission's debating something, and then an applicant gets up and they start saying something, and now your motion goes in a different direction. And it's really for you to hear from the public and the applicant at the right time, but then to, have the motion on the table is really for your debate.
Can you give me maybe an example? I'm trying to really understand that when to make a motion thing. Because you said a couple of things and I got a little confused, because you said you really should have a motion and a second before.
Well, under strict Robert's Rules of Order, they want a motion to start debate, but we,
Start debate.
yeah, motion, so then you can start talking about it to make sure that there's enough people that really want to talk about it. If motion and a second, and then it's on the table for you to debate. But and Mason brought this up last time, I'm okay if you want to talk about it a little bit before the motion. Because it's hard to do, yeah, because you're kind of talking about, well, what about, tell me about the average slope, and Tyler asks, okay, well, what about a variance? Have they explored that?
Yeah.
To me, all of those were really good questions prior motion, because you're still asking questions about things. But let's say you get into, well, I really think that, we should allow 10-foot fences because it makes for, more buffering and that kind of thing. Now you're kind of really getting into the substance of it. And that's where I like having that debate in the record under the motion. So remember, we're also creating a record in the minutes. And so if you have all this really great discussion beforehand, sometimes in the minutes it doesn't get there. But if you've made your motion, the minutes secretary tends to put more of your discussion and debate on the motion, and we'll get all of that
Which
good
further
discussion.
proves the motion and further supports the motion when it's made, and then a small debate that comes after.
So then,
Makes sense.
make a motion to discuss and second it, right? And then we discuss if I'm.
Well, it's just, no, it's a motion. I move to deny the text
Oh, okay,
amendment.
then. So
That's
we're
the
still
motion.
okay to do it in the order that we do
Yeah.
it? Okay.
In the second, but then sometimes we'll say any discussion on the motion. I think that's what Lisa's saying, that sometimes there's small, where you might have an opinion and another planning commissioner might have a different opinion. That's the right time to talk and try to refine your own opinions internally after you've gotten all the information from staff and the applicant prior.
Yeah, and I think tonight, I think the debate and the questions, the questions were good about understanding what we're doing, and is there anything else, have we thought about other issues or procedure, things like that. And I think the planning commission does a pretty good job. One area where I see planning commissions, I like to say here that, I guess we're still on the purpose slide. Well, now let's finish the purpose
Okay.
slide. Because it does say it protects, ensures the fairness, so people know when they get to speak and have their say, but it protects the right of the majority to decide and the right of the minority to be heard. And this is a really important point, that remember, you're just here, it's a majority decision, and sometimes commissions they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings and they want to get to a unanimous vote, but that's not really why we're here. And what I see is that, the right decision sort of gets watered down or, amended because of a minority voice. And really you're here just to make, if it's a reasonable condition, like, hey, it usually, let's say somebody says, well, I want a fence, and I think the fence should be white, and, our code doesn't require color on fences, and anyway, I think if just make sure that you're making your decisions and having your discussion based upon what's in the best interest of the community. That's what we're here for, and it's, and for the majority to make that decision rather than just adding a couple things that one commissioner wanted. Yeah.
I've got a question, just pragmatically speaking, like what we did tonight, we're making it a denial, and then it has to go to the city council. Whereas, now they've got to, whereas we could have tabled it and then still made the recommendation for staff to come back with the findings, but now we pushed it to the city council. So then that just is more notice, more time from them. So like, does the city council have a preference for these sort of situations where maybe a tabling could have been an alternative route to just, internally have, staff go look at it and then come back to planning commission and then go to the city? I think, Sean, you were kind of alluding to that, your first question about, hey, did we talk to the city engineer? Does the city council, because if I'm sitting on the city council, I'm thinking, well,
Yeah.
they're denying it, why don't they just table it, and then
Yeah.
bring it back up?
Table it and fix it, yeah, and that's a great question, and I think, yes, the city council wants the planning commission to vet applications before it comes to them, and state law actually requires it in terms of our code and our general plan. We want the commission to look and give their recommendation. This one was difficult because if you tabled it and directed staff, you're basically directing staff to be a co-applicant. And it's not necessarily our role, and it also gets quite awkward because we would come back and it would be 10 pages of code revision, and they're thinking, well, this isn't my text amendment.
Fix it, and it's like, by tabling it, it's giving them almost hope that nothing's gonna change until internally things get.
Yeah, and
So if we
having
just keep
this,
tabling it,
yeah, this co-application, it ends up where it's not even their application anymore, and that can be frustrating too, because they're like, wait a minute, I didn't ask for this.
Yeah, or I don't like this.
I just want you to look at my one narrow thing, and so that's what
Yeah,
staff
what
is
if we bring
saying.
back something that he hates?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, and that would have been it. We probably it would have been a compromise or, or something. So I think this one, I think you're absolutely right. Under normal circumstances or a majority of the time, we'll try to work with them and, come to something like the planning commission says, hey, just tweak this a little bit, and we will work with them and say, yeah, this isn't necessarily a bad idea, but here's staff's recommendations. But this one was just too complicated, I think.
And the depth and gravity, well, that's why I turned to Lisa and said, how much time do we have? Because I don't see this as being a 30-day turnaround or 60-day turnaround.
Too many tentacles.
So it's got too much weight on it for that. And then, again, we come back with something that's large or comprehensive and maybe doesn't even benefit him. It's just.
And then the other factor is why I said in the end, I'd like to see this to go to the city council and see where their, number one, their interest, their
Yep.
priority, and
Kinda
their
like what
support.
Mike was saying earlier.
Because you're directing the city to expend funds in terms of staff time. I mean, this would be 40 hours worth of research.
Yeah.
And so I really think the city council should be making that expenditure of, of funds and resources. Is this your priority as well?
Yeah. Well, and they may have the other fence issue, I think you were saying, that they have, maybe can say, okay, from just a higher, plane, that they've seen other issues. They can say, okay, now we see this is a big issue, that's a big issue, so let's go expend those funds.
Yeah, and I mentioned that the city council can direct staff to do, to make this a priority and actually direct us to, draft something. The planning commission also has that authority. I didn't mention that with the applicant here. I didn't want to complicate it and get into all this training, but just like you said, Tyler, you can, as a planning commission, say, this is a priority for us, put it on our goals. We, as a planning commission, want to do some planning this year. We want to get into this, and this is going to be on our goal. And even in that sense, you're directing staff as well to do that. So you have that authority. Okay.
When do we have that authority? At what point? At what point during the meeting?
It's,
At the end, when we're having discussion? Like, if that's what we want?
Part of our motion, I would assume.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because we need to make sure that anything we're going to talk about is on the agenda. So I do suggest, if it's something like this one, I probably would not put it in the conditions 1, 2, and 3, because remember, someone could appeal those. And so let's say we deny there at the city council, and one of the conditions is directing staff to do something. Well, let's say we never get to that. Have we now not complied with the motion? Or So anyway, typically, we have the motions that support the decision, that's what it's based on, that's what they could appeal, and then it's a separate in the motion, and we also direct staff to put this on our priority list as something to look at in our, in our goals. Or we recommend staff do this, because we do want to be responsive to the planning commission, do what are your priorities, so, that would be my preference, not just say, this is a, demand letter, or this is a urgent, because sometimes things get in the way and we don't get to it, and we don't want a record or a decision that
Lisa,
we're
this
gonna
is
trip
also
on.
why there's a chair and a vice chair as well, right? They could easily request from the chair or vice chair between meetings, and if the chair and vice chair agree that it's an important thing on the agenda, we could put goals on the agenda and discuss things that the planning commissioners have asked us.
Oh, yes,
So
yeah.
informally, you could go through that process as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. So if you hadn't thought about it, but that's the way I would do it for this one, is just make your motion as stated in the staff report with an additional comment. And so when you look at the minutes, it'll say motion to do this, and then another paragraph, the planning commission also directed staff to put this on their goals and, issued it as a high priority, whatever, you want to say, but.
But we've already made the motion, right? So that window's gone.
No, because we put it in your findings, and the findings aren't in the motion itself, but there's some directive, don't.
Well, yeah, it's actually, the
Yeah.
motion that was made is to add to condition number 2, so that will go to the city council
Yeah.
with that directive. So, does that make sense? But yeah, if.
So yeah,
if you-
so in other words, you can do it on in the motion in conjunction with an application, or like you're saying, if you find something in the code that you think as a planning commissioner, it makes sense to amend or upgrade or.
Right, not even related, yeah, the chair and vice chair.
Informally, you could reach out to the chair and say, I think this is an issue, and if he agrees, it could end up on the agenda.
Yeah, yes, and we had a standing rule where we would put your goals on every agenda, so we would look at them and review them, and that, so you could always look at your goals, and as part of the goal-setting agenda item, say, hey, I also thought maybe the planning commission should look at this.
And like anything else that has hierarchy, stuff could kind of roll up as we started eliminating things or resolving things, so that list is always moving. So it's organic.
Yeah,
So really those goals will be based on like the legislative issues, right? 'Cause those are.
Yeah, or even procedure, yeah, it's still legislative, but maybe more the procedural elements that maybe don't seem to be working the best, or even staff recommends some procedural things that maybe could be more efficient.
yeah.
Some of
But
these things.
we do want the planning commission to be engaged, and part of being on the planning commission is, recommending new policy or giving input on the general plan. I mean, I think we will be very busy this year with the general plan review and other items, and implementing the new legislation from the state, those types of things. But if you have other ideas that you want to work on as a commission, you also put that on your goals and have staff work on them.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, like some past planning commissions, we were giving a lot of parking modification. Like, every applicant wanted a parking modification, and so we said, the commission's,
So let's fix
even
that.
staff said, if everybody's getting an exception, then we need to look. So the planning commission said, hey, we want to look
See,
at
that's
parking.
the standard.
And it started with the commission, not the city council necessarily. The commission said, we want to look at our parking counts.
And ironically, to that point, the reason I chuckle is because now the state legislature is talking about ways to make comprehensive laws for parking across the state. So get ready for another round of that discussion potentially.
Yep. All right. Better start zipping through these. Okay, so under Robert's rules, they also say that you need to have a quorum in order to conduct business. And, again, the why is that you really just need to have enough people to conduct the people's business. So, if you only have 2 people, they really shouldn't be, that's not enough to be conducting the people's business. So, the quorum for the planning commission is 4 members. And I know we've been having a hard time getting a quorum lately, and so we're hoping that you can calendar out these meetings. Like, I don't know if we send, because we can even send you a a meeting invite, like that's what we do for the city council. The city sends out a meeting invite and you say accept, and it puts the whole calendar, you know, you can just accept the calendar invite if that's something that
Do you
would be.
guys want that? Okay.
Will you do
That'd be
that?
nice.
Yeah,
think that
normally I
would be
email
nice.
back, but I never know.
Yeah, so that way, I like that because then the meeting is on your calendar for the entire year. And you don't have to remember, oh, is that the second or third? So that might be a really good thing.
Yeah, I can do that.
And,
Or you just,
and just letting the chair and Whitney and Mike know if you can't be there so that we know we can get a quorum, so. Okay, and then the next one is the majority rules. We already kind of talked about this, that it's a majority vote, just a general majority vote of a quorum, members present. But in reviewing the Roberts rules, just for this training, you know, it was saying that once a decision has been made, the majority has made the decision, then everyone needs to abide by it. And I thought that was a good reminder. It's probably more so at the legislative city council level, where sometimes we have disappointment with, you know, the decision. But it's the same thing with staff, like, you know, once the council's made a decision, even if it was not taking staff's advice or they wanted to go a different policy direction, then we get on board and we say, let's make this successful. Okay, that wasn't the direction we were recommending, but we jump on board and we, you know, pursue that policy direction that the council gives us.
so do you three go to each of the city planning, or the city council meetings too?
I do not. I only go when I have.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah. But we do, yeah. And actually, all the,
Twice a month too, right?
yeah.
Alternative Wednesday nights or
Yeah.
Tuesday nights, yeah.
But it's really nice because we get to see this, you know, this whole debate, and then it goes up to the council and it has a different, you know, another debate, and, you know, it's helpful, so. And the council does really appreciate what the planning commission does, so to your question and point, yeah, they really look at your recommendation, and, you know, there might be sometimes they disagree, but they are looking to the planning commission to do a lot of the heavy
That
lifting.
would be nice to know when.
Well, yeah, you might have heard of some of those, like the parking counts.
We'll try to report on outcomes of council meetings too, so you're
That'd be
staying
great.
abreast of what's going on.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, usually it'll give a little report that, you know, what the vote was or what some of the debate. Okay, so just a little training on making the motion. So procedurally, as we mentioned, you have to make a motion, and that motion needs to be seconded in order to, you know, have it on the table. So we do give suggested motions in the staff report, and sometimes we'll have conditions and findings. So we do recommend if you
Can't
can.
we read verbatim that, right?
Yeah, you can change it, you know, if there's some debate and the planning commission wants to change what's in there, feel free to, you know, take some notes or write down.
Verbiage is kind of what we want to.
Yes, but I do like the first paragraph, because we want to say, what are we doing? We're doing a zone text change. For what? For fences, what section of the code and where? Or we're doing a conditional use permit for this location, for this applicant. You know, it is important that that's read into the record, the detail of those motions, you know, because you don't want to just say, oh, we give a conditional use permit to this person, but we don't say a conditional use permit for used car sales.
This location.
Yeah, at this location. But sometimes you will change some of the conditions or the findings, like we did last week.
Yeah, the findings, I was gonna say, that's kind of where you get some flexibility, so if we have a list of 5 and you feel only 3 or 4 pertinent, you have the right to only use 3 or 4, or use 5, or even add your own 6 and 7.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
discretionary.
Oh, like last time, we added some stuff.
Yes,
Makes-
yeah, and we changed them.
We did.
So,
Yeah.
and I do like to say, you know, just affirmatively say, I move, or I make a motion to, and then, you know, to approve or deny or table, and then we have the second. So let's talk a little bit about friendly amendments, because we get a lot of those. So I'm okay, I used to say no friendly amendments, you know, just make your own amendment. But I've relaxed on that because I do think, like even tonight, hey, like mine, when I said you want to add the findings and conditions, you could have just said, oh yes, to clarify my motion, it's this motion, including the findings set forth in the staff report, something like that.
So he could have done that, sorry. I got it.
But, and it was,
I come from Parks and Rec, we're very lax over there. So
yeah. and-
I
we
learned
just
that
say
last week.
things.
Yeah, and so, but even, especially in land use, you know, these decisions can be challenged, and so the conditions and the findings are very important. The conditions we use, like for subdivisions and things like that, before they can record the plat, we go back and we make sure they've met every condition that the planning commission wanted, that type of thing. But anyway, so I'm okay, like if somebody makes a motion and it's seconded, and then someone says, oh, were we gonna make that one change to condition 5? Then just do it and say, is that acceptable to the maker of the motion? And you say, yeah, that's acceptable, and, you know, acceptable to the second, that's fine. But if you are going to actually change the motion substantively, like, so let's say tonight it was, you know, on this fencing thing, and you wanted to add a condition that, that the applicant do something else, or you wanted to, you know, add something like that, then my recommendation would be that you own that amendment, and you say, well, I would like to amend the motion, so that the maker of the motion doesn't feel pressured to accept your friendly amendment that's not really friendly. That's just sort of my pet peeve. Like, if it's not a clarification, or you forgot this, you know, or the maker of the motion could also say, because there was some debate, I know Mason did this one time, somebody said, oh, well, were you going to add this? And he said, no, I wasn't. So this is my motion, I don't want that in there. If you would like to amend the motion, then just amend it. And amending it is simple. Just say, I move to amend to add, you know, the clarification that, you know, the applicant follow up on something, whatever condition you wanted to add, and then you need a second to that amendment. And sometimes amendments fail because there isn't anyone that's in favor of it, and that's okay. You know, you tried, and that's what the procedures are here for, to see if there's even two people. So once the amendment is seconded, then you talk about it basically brings just the amendment on the table. So now you're just talking about the amendment. You know, oh, should we add a fence? Should we do this? And then the chair says, okay, you know, if there's no further debate, let's take a vote on the amendment. And that's all you're voting on is the amendment. So it's like, just think of it kind of up here. And so then if everybody votes in favor of the amendment, then the chair should say, okay, now we have a motion on the table as amended to require the white fence. Is there any further discussion or any additional amendments? And then you have to vote on the motion as amended. So last week, we didn't have that second step. The motion was for the amendment and the entire, and I just let it go, because again, I don't want the rules to get in the way, but next time we'll just, you vote on the amendment, and then it's as amended, because there might be another amendment. And so, and I like the amendment also as an efficiency procedure. So sometimes, like with Walmart or some of these other very complicated items where there's, you know, debate among the planning commission. We don't know. Half the commission may want, you know, the fence, half may want a new parking stall. I like to take those controversial items one by one in an amendment. So, well, I move to amend to put the white fence in, you know, and then you just debate that, and that passes, and then somebody else says, okay, well, I move to amend to move the access point, you know, 20 feet east as we discussed. And then you can talk about that, because sometimes they're just so complicated. We've had where it takes like 20 minutes for somebody to make a motion and then nobody even seconds it because you put too many detailed things that were on your laundry list rather than just making a general motion to approve, and then we're going to handle those. And sometimes, so if we have a really controversial thing, we'll probably have that discussion with you, like, hey, we suggest you tackle some of these big issues individually with amendments. Does that make sense?
So does the amendment, can it only be made as a motion before the motion is voted on, or can you make an amendment to the motion after the motion has been passed?
Once the motion's been passed, you cannot, yeah, it's not subject to amendment, it's been passed. Now, you could make a motion to reconsider because, you got something or you wanted to do that, but typically we do not use motions to reconsider very often because people have left or the applicant's gone and now they find out that there was a separate condition that we added when they weren't even here.
So get your amendment in before the motion is voted on.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And technical Robert's Rules of Order, the motion to reconsider, you can only bring it up at the same meeting. We say you can bring it up at the next meeting. Because what will sometimes happen after a motion has been made, we get new information or someone says, I had no idea, or we found out about this. And so we do allow a motion for reconsider at the next meeting, and we notice that with the exact same notice for the original, and we make sure the applicant knows, and we do a new, staff report. And motions to reconsider are rare, but they're very similar to a motion to amend. It's a two-step. So you have to make a motion. I make a motion to reconsider this item, and that motion just brings it back on the table. And then it means that the last motion is still there. Okay, motion to reconsider passes. We have the motion to approve. Is there any further debate or amendment? And then somebody makes an amendment, and then it passes. I think we've only done that like 3 times at the city council, but I'm trying to think what the scenario was, but it was important to reconsider. Like, I think they had maybe denied something, and then they had more information and thought, well, if we get additional information, another traffic study, then we can approve this.
The next slide's amendment would be.
Oh,
Sorry.
I didn't tell you that. But there you go. There's the amendment.
okay. Yeah.
Jumped the gun for the last.
Well, just on the motion, though, we were talking about making the motion and the second, and then the amendment. But the debate is very important on the motion as well. So as we were saying before, that's where we get the record of, hey, we're talking about things that are relevant and important. And this is where I said sometimes as staff, we do need to step in. If you ask irrelevant questions, it may sound interesting to you, but it may also taint the record. So for instance, if, we had a council member who loved to ask whenever a condo or a subdivision would come through, hey, what's your price point on these houses? Or how much are you gonna sell that top unit for? Or, and you may think, oh, that's really interesting, I'd like to know, but it could be considered, like, what if these are lower end or, and now we're talking about economics or, the type of people that are going to live there or whatever, and that has nothing to do with the subdivision or the condominium. So you may think it's just just an interesting question, but if you could keep the record clean, and that might be where we say that's not relevant to our discussion tonight.
Do you have like any objections? I mean, can people make a formal objection, like? Or no, Robert Rules of Orders doesn't.
No, this is great. This is what is good about Robert's Rules is once we get a planning commission and they're really well trained, sometimes even commissioners will say, well, point of order, Chair, I think that question is out of order or, or procedurally, we haven't, heard from the applicant. So yeah, you can bring up and say.
Objection,
Mr. Litigator.
irrelevant.
That question has nothing.
Yeah.
Hearsay.
Love it.
Yeah, it's just, more of a point of order. It's not relevant to the decision we're making tonight. And again, don't take it personally because sometimes we're just thinking about things and you ask a question but just so you know, that's why staff tries to bring it back. Not that we're trying to get out of here and hurry up, but it's just we want to keep the record clean, that we're making decisions based on our ordinance and not discriminatory decisions. Okay. And then, I think the next one is our discussion and debate. We've had, I think our planning commissions have done a really good job talking about things and discussing in this really respectful civic dialogue that, is sort of a lost art. But I think we do a good job about, being respectful of others and also bringing up great, thoughts and questions that staff hadn't even thought of. And we appreciate that, and we always recognize, oh yeah, it's nice having the planning commission review these things that we haven't thought about. Because sometimes we get so myopic in, just reviewing our code and, but the commission kind of looks at it a little bit bigger picture, I
And we
think.
try to have thick skin, so don't think we'll take it personal if you ask a tough question. It might be like
One of my
this,
worries-
it's not we're sad or mad, we're probably contemplating what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
My worry is that like we're coming from, I mean, this is like literally your profession. You spend every day doing this stuff, and they come in with some like somewhat uneducated question. You go, I can't believe one of these planning commission members.
Why are they here?
Mayor, well, how'd you,
Clark, what did you do?
no, we really appreciate the insight and that you read your packets and you come prepared with thoughtful questions. The one thing I would say here, though, I guess just a little bit of input, it seems like lately the Planning Commission has been sort of trying to solve issues and problems and set policy, when really your role is to, review. So if it's an administrative decision, you're just trying to say, does this application meet our code? It's not, if you see a problem with our code, put that on your list of things to look at, because we can't change the code the day that the applicant's here. And it's not on our agenda, and it's not, within your
I
jurisdiction.
think you made a good point of that, because I think we have gotten kind of caught up in like, can we solve it right now?
Right, the last few
But
times.
you made.
and there's pressure to do that, right?
Right,
Right.
and they're sitting
Yeah.
out here like, I'm not gonna be able to have my house.
They're
I'm not
staring
gonna-"
you down.
Yeah, well, and I've been trying to put, myself in your shoes, because it is hard, you have an applicant right here, and I was just trying to think of what's another way to say, we're sympathetic, and I think tonight you did a good job, like you said, I can see, we're sympathetic to this issue that you've raised, but, rather than saying, here, let's solve this, or what, could we change this in our code? That's not what we're here for. We're here just to review their text amendment, but you can always put something on the list for next time.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in that. If there's something that could be clearer in our code or something that we don't address, then let's put it on the list and tackle it when we can.
Your discretion is solely contained by the nature of the request, right? If it's a land use, then your discretion is tied to the land use restrictions of the type of request you have. It's not all the other stuff that's swirling around the request, right? And so you have to think about very pointedly, what is the nature of the request, and stay within that sphere of consideration.
Yeah. I mean, like tonight, we talked about the other land, and then you start your fence there.
Yeah.
Could we have made a motion to like amend his application and the actual zoning language? And then said, hey, based on this, I mean, with such a myopic, scope of knowledge and questioning and looking at other ordinances.
Like a
stuff
recommendation to change the code, if you had your own, if you came up with a eureka moment on
Yeah,
this?
right.
I mean, I don't know, I guess. you
Well, we
could,
have done
right?
that. So if
Yeah.
you look at past staff
Yeah.
reports, applicants will bring in, they're not the best code writers, and so usually on applicant-driven text amendments, staff does provide a laundry list of recommendations. If you want to go this direction, we recommend these changes. And sometimes they're comprehensive, sometimes they're, just simple, easy word changes. It just depends on the application. But, we've had very complicated, ordinances that we will go through and make a lot of suggested changes. And again, this one was just too complicated to fix on the fly. Or even with a lot of time, I think it's
I
complicated.
think too, it comes back to, if you really feel like you have a eureka moment, for lack of a better word, and you get into your motion phase and you make a motion such that you feel strongly that solves the problem, that again goes back to what Lisa's saying. That's where you open it up with that motion, get a second, and open up to debate to see if the other planning commissioners are persuaded to feel the same way.
Yeah.
Because just because we say, hey, deny or table, you might say, hey, I think this can be approved and here's how. That's your opportunity to vet the rest of the planning commissioners to see if they agree with the solution.
And then technically tonight, because it was a legislative decision, it was just us saying, we approve it with these stipulations. Here you go, city council, what do you guys think?
That would be an alternative,
Yeah.
yeah, had you done that. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, it's pointed within the sphere of what you're trying to consider,
Scope.
right? The scope of it, yeah.
No. So, yeah, I think.
I didn't have a eureka moment, so.
They're rare, but they do happen.
And I do want to say that the maker of the motion and the person that seconded does not have to vote in favor of the motion. You can make the motion and still, after all the discussion and debate, and that's why we have it, you can still say, this has been very persuasive, I actually am voting no on my own motion.
Yeah, you can vote yourself out.
I don't like my own motion, it's
Yeah.
the worst. I've never really thought of it to do that,
It happens.
Normally you want to win your motion.
Yeah. I think Mason's made amendments that he votes against. He just wanted to get it out there.
After that moment comes, oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, the next point on when you're discussing and debating, just try to avoid personal remarks or judgment. And, that one seems pretty common sense, but this reminds me of a few, like another issue that if you can be careful, like when you address the applicant directly, they want to talk back with you. And so it sort of creates this dialogue that the process is not always made for. So like if you could say, I'm sympathetic to the applicant, rather than saying, I'm sympathetic to you because I see your fence here, because you're just making them want to get up and be able to say something, but at that point, they can't say anything because you're talking about your motion. So my preference is, rather than directing it at the applicant or the angry residents, that the commission talk to each other. Like, well, the public comment tonight was really, persuasive in saying that that's going to be allowed use, and I think we should add some buffering, or, I'm sympathetic with the applicant and this fence, rather than saying because then you're bringing them into the dialogue and,
Did we do that? Did we do that tonight?
Well, sometimes you do it, and then they say, oh, well, what about this?
Exactly, you'll
just-
see.
Right, but
Put
did
something-
we?
Because they think you're trying to talk to them, because we are.
I didn't feel like your commentary addressed them when you made the comment about being sympathetic with the applicant. I think that's how it was worded.
No, yeah, I think this just, I'm just using past examples of how it brings them back in and it makes it more of a, just
I
in
didn't
general.
feel like you were engaging with him after he sat down at all.
Okay.
Last week, though, remember, I believe it was the architect wanted to jump, he wanted to.
Yes.
Right, and maybe we did make him feel like he had the opportunity to, so.
Yeah, and that's where, like, the chair it can be very helpful in how the meeting is conducted, because they can say, like on some of our really big public hearings, we'll actually outline and say, we're going to hear from the applicant, then we're going to have a public hearing, we're going to close the public hearing, and after the public hearing, we're going to give the applicant an opportunity to respond, and then the applicant is going to sit down. Sometimes you really have to say that, because if you're the chair and the applicant's still standing there, once the motion's on the table, you really need to just say, can I just, you can sit down or something, because they think now they're going to talk and debate with you as well, and so you have to help cue them. And then also you're cueing the public, okay, the public hearing is now closed, or, give them a lot of time. Is there anyone else that wants to speak? The public hearing is now closed, and you kind of make a point of it, and you pause, and then you say, okay, commission, this is now up for debate and a motion for us to debate this. And you're kind of setting, okay, now we're going to do it. Because this is one of my favorite recommendations or suggestions is to avoid this circular debate too, because if you hear yourselves arguing the same thing, and this commission doesn't do it as much as previous ones, but like sometimes you'll get a commissioner that just says something and then the other one says it, and then, you're just going the rounds around and around. And so if you're saying something that you heard yourself say 2 or 3 times, it means that the debate is probably
You made your
done.
point.
And this is where other commissioners can say, Chair, I'd like to call the motion, or, I'd like to make a motion to cease debate, something like that. But this commission doesn't seem to have a problem with that. But the circular debate is similar if you're having this public hearing, then we talk, then we open the public hearing, and then we talk, and then the applicant does say, it's just going to go all night. Everybody always wants one more one more say and one more thought. So,
I've even seen people in the audience say, can I get up and say one more? And the mayor has said, no, we don't have time to that. We've heard what you have to say.
yeah, because if you let that person, then you better, you're gonna have to let another one, and now now, on very controversial items where we are hearing things, and, we may do something like that, because part of our job and role is to listen. And, we want people to feel heard. We don't want them to feel like we're rushing the process, but we also want to be mindful of everyone else. And this is where I say, I think running an efficient meeting is respectful. And I think people will respect the professionalism of that rather than just listening to everyone, because people have places to be, or the applicant thinking, no, this is going on and on and on. So, speaking of on and on, let's get going. Okay, postponement, I just do want to go over this. A lot of times we talk about a motion to table. There's actually not a motion to table under Robert's rules. There's a motion to postpone and a motion to lay on the table. Luckily, we don't use that one, but anyway, we still, it's like laying the motion on the table. We're just going to lay it here and think about it, and then basically you're going to come back to it later. But
In the same meeting?
Yeah.
Is that what it means?
so, but we do use motion to table. I am comfortable with that, but I want you to have a reason to table. I guess a reason might be I can't make a decision, but if you're like, sometimes it's frustrating, like if the council just didn't come prepared, or they don't know what decision to make. It takes a lot of time to renotice, reschedule, put another staff report on, it's a lot of work to get something on. So if it's ready to be decided on, act on it. If you need more information, if you had a lot of public comment and we really need to read through all that and weigh that, those are legitimate reasons to postpone. Or if you came up with ideas like, hey, we want staff to do more research, so you can certainly make a motion to table, but we also ask for specific direction. I make a motion to table and direct staff to research what 5 other cities in Davis County are doing on fencing and to talk to the city engineer.
And I'll make sure it's really clear, not just some nebulous thing where we have to staff guess what you want us to do or want to find out, right? If it's more clear, then we know what our marching orders are to make it efficient for your next meeting.
And if it's pretty simple information that you want, then a recommendation is you make a motion to table to a date certain. So a motion to table to the next meeting. That way we don't technically have to renotice everything on these applications. If we table it to indefinitely or until staff has it ready, then we will renotice everything and put it back on the agenda, which is fine, because sometimes things will take a few, 4 weeks. It's very hard, just so you understand in terms of staff. So this is Wednesday night.
Sorry, go ahead.
What?
I was just gonna say, this Friday, we have to get city staff.
Exactly, this Friday, so tomorrow, we're all gonna be rushing around trying to get staff reports ready for the Friday city council packet. And then it's Monday and we have DRC, so then Tuesday we finally have time, and our packet basically has to be ready by Thursday. Well, at least that's my deadline. The packet goes out Friday, so it's nice to have things done Thursday or Friday. So when you think we've got 2 weeks, but we really don't. We have next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to put time into that. So oftentimes it'll be the 4-week thing.
Is there a timeline by which you have to have a deadline for that tabling of the motion?
Meaning, well, can you table
Duration of
indefinitely?
time.
Right. I mean, can you table it for 6 months
That's why I
or
was
3
wondering,
months
have
to?
the legislature, have they weighed in on that? I don't remember.
Well, it depends if it's applicant driven. If it's applicant driven, I would not suggest a
That's what I was
3
thinking.
or 6 month tabling,
Yeah.
because they do have a right for us to pursue their application with reasonable due diligence. And so we're essentially, putting them on the back burner. What we usually do is we try to work with the applicant behind the scenes with staff and say, you've raised a lot of interesting points, why don't you request the tabling, and then let's get together and then we work with them. So that's a lot less of a legal risk in my mind to have the applicant request the tabling. And so sometimes we'll do that, and that's very nice rather than us, because
Because they
they're.
could have done that tonight. They could have requested that we tabled it.
Yes, they could have. Said, hey, I can see, and some applicants will, they're like, I see where this is going, and some developers really don't want a denial recommendation on their record.
Yeah.
And so they can see where it's going, they'll say, you know what, we would like to request you table this, and usually we honor that. If they want to do it, and then we'll work with them, and they'll say, oh yeah, I see where this is going, we could have done a better job, let's.
Do they see the denial recommendation before they get here at the meetings?
Yes, we're required by law to provide all applicants the agenda and the staff report 3 business days in advance of the meeting. So when it goes out Friday, Whitney sends them a link and say, here's your thing, and review.
So like Mr. Jensen, did he ever comment and say, hey, is there any other alternative to this, just denial? I mean, kind of probably.
He's got quite a bit of history prior, but not by the time.
Yeah, no, he didn't say anything after I sent him the staff report,
Okay.
so.
Sometimes people will call, and sometimes people will call and say, hey, can you pull us from the agenda? We didn't, this is a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So we have had that. I think that was a few weeks
And
ago.
again, if a recommendation is made, and even staff isn't aware of all the facts and new facts come out, and you feel like the recommendation of staff is tilted differently, clearly that's where you have an opportunity to recommend approval or recommend approval with conditions, right? That's the organic nature of these things. We may have 80% or 90% we think we have it all, but then something comes in and it can change the very complexion of that request, right? So it's not gonna hurt our feelings for you to weigh all the factors, even new factors that maybe we weren't aware of, if it indeed, I guess, helps you to make what you feel is the right and correct motion at that time.
And just as part of this training, I think it's also important for the chair to repeat things. So like I like to say, okay, we have a motion on the table too, and have the chair repeat it, because we're all, I'm sure you're all thinking about different things, and you were doing this, and then you were like, uh-oh, wait, what was the motion? So it's really nice. I like the repetition. If you have a motion and then the chair just says, okay, we have a motion to approve or deny or whatever it is, like basically just summarize the main, is there any discussion or debate? Are there any amendments? And then when there's an amendment, they say, okay, it's been amended. Again, the motion is to deny. So that there's just these cues, because again, we may lose our train of thought or something like that. So, and then hopefully, maybe just in the next few months or weeks, as you're looking at your staff reports and things like that, try to think about, okay, what is my role tonight? Is this, okay, it's a subdivision, it's a site plan, it's a text amendment, what is the procedure? And, as staff, we'll try to state that as well, but I think I can hear from the commission, we're still trying to understand, okay, this is just a recommendation to city council, what's next? And understanding, oh, this is a subdivision and we make the final decision. So this is, this is it. Because that is an important thing when you come to the meeting to know what's the framework of our decision.
Especially with subdivisions, because you are, in some cases, giving some limited vestiture, which gives them obviously some legal protection of what you do. So you need to make sure you fully understand what decisions you're making, how it affects that request.
Yeah, and there'll be more. Okay, and then just the last one, I think Mason we talked a little bit about the training and wanted to have a few, just sort of professionalism and decorum comments. So, again, just out of respect, I like to recommend that we start on time, and, we have the applicants here, and it's helpful. I know sometimes traffic, other things, but in general, it's nice to start the meeting on time. And I think the Planning Commission does a good job reading their packets. We really appreciate that, and I think the applicants, they know if you haven't, read the packet, or if we're just coming here and kind of winging it, and so I think they appreciate that. Also, respect the floor. I guess this is just if the applicant's speaking or a fellow commissioner, it's very distracting to have sidebar discussions, and it's also hard for the minutes secretary, because she actually doesn't attend the meeting, she just listens to them. And these microphones actually pick up quite a bit. And so, like if you listen to YouTube, you can hear all those sidebars on some of those. And sometimes the mics are still going, like, or they start before the meeting, or they're still going after the meeting. So I would also caution you, like, be careful. I think now we push record, but anyway, there's some meetings on YouTube with just general discussions up here, and it's on YouTube forever. And it's, and just so under state law, you're not allowed to text each other during the meeting. But I think the general request is just to try to avoid texting, because it's just the appearance, like and I know sometimes, like during city council, I'll get a text from one of the department heads like, hey, are we gonna do this? And, I try not to do that, because it's just this appearance that we must be talking about this item, or we're colluding, and, or how are you gonna vote? And so, obviously, we're not doing that, but that's the appearance, so, I guess that's it. But I really appreciate this, and I hope we have more opportunity to, sort of talk, and we really appreciate your questions, if you have any, and getting, we've had a lot of new members, and so it also takes time for you guys to sort of mesh together and get used to each other's comments and, I guess, approach to things. But we really appreciate your service, and I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'm sorry it took longer than I thought.
Anybody have any questions for Lisa?
How's your headache?
It's actually better.
See, the more
I
you
must have thought, yeah.
That is
For a minute there, I was like, wow, I think it's gone.
Robert Rules of Order.
I know.
Thank you, Lisa. We have a third item of business tonight, a discussion on the 2024 Planning Commission goals and priorities. And we're going to turn the time back to staff. for
Yeah,
that.
I just wanted to take like 5 or 7 minutes and introduce, we're going to start talking about this at the next couple meetings, I would assume, and just get some ideas, if you have any right off the bat, what you want us to work on this year. I have written down fences and walls already. And we've started the general plan, but anything else specific, any trainings that you want us to go over with you, anything like that, right off the bat, if you have any at the next meeting or the one after that, we can come back with a more comprehensive list.
And we do have training modules. I've shown them to Whitney, and I think we've talked about maybe even tandem doing it. Every other meeting we'll take over, or we'll maybe take one of the modules, because there's quite a bit of reading, and maybe cut them in half. And then maybe I'll do the first half and she'll do the second or something. We're still figuring that out. But there's more than plenty of trainings I have that I want Lisa to screen first, because some of it's a little bit older stuff, but it's still really good. And we'll take those forward. So I guess my point is probably look forward to some kind of training, whether it be mini or large, depending on what the rest of the agenda looks like at every meeting. That's a goal we've talked about internally between the three of us.
Yeah, shorter topics, just a 15
Like 15
minute.
minutes or
Yes,
something?
Yeah.
I find those helpful.
Depends on what the weight of the meeting is, right? If it's something that's really weighty, maybe it's even just a 5-minute, hey, here's a short thing to remember about your role as a planning commissioner. Obviously, if we have more time, maybe it'd be more like 15 minutes or so. Yeah.
But is there anything code-wise that you guys want us to look at this year besides fences and walls, anything off the bat?
And you could even take this list with you and tell us at the next meeting. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah, so, or you can send me an email and I can
Yeah.
put it on the list and bring it back at another meeting, but really it was just an introduction to get you to start thinking, and the 2023 goals are in this packet if that gives you some ideas. A lot of it is the general plan, and Corey put that together, but, just start thinking about what you guys want to work on this year.
Whitney, is your thinking then they'll put on the list and then they'll kind of prioritize what's
Yeah,
most
yeah,
important?
so, give us a list and we'll prioritize and maybe come up with some specific steps for the first couple that are a priority, so.
Wasn't there that attorney that came by that she's taking the lead to do the general plan, is that? what
No,
she's
that
making
was just
some
a
amendments
subdivision
to?
ordinance, that was just
That was the
subdivision, yeah, so we're done with that.
Yeah.
But we'll be coming back with some subdivision amendments.
We will.
Okay, so is her work basically done on
Yeah,
that?
they said they can do some training for us on the subdivision ordinance rewrites if we want. So like, yeah, if there's some specific subdivision or legislative updates, but we did adopt all of those subdivision ordinance amendments that we were required to from the 2023 legislative session, and now we're scrambling to comply with the
I was
2024.
gonna say, that will be on the list because it's mandatory, there's
Yeah.
2024.
And
And
how
that's-
much, just for subdivision amendments, or?
Like land use regulations, we're still trying to figure out the gravity of all these.
Yeah.
Well, and we're finding, so we made all these changes on the subdivision and saying, okay, for these kind of, single family, the final plat does not go to the city council anymore, but we're also finding that since we consolidated some things, like when someone comes in for final, oh, well, now they're not going to preliminary, and that's where we get the Alta survey, and so we need to make some corrections to ours, because I think we're missing a few.
The checklist or the deliverables
Yeah.
at each stage, yeah.
Or even a
I
catch-all.
think that would be helpful, like some more training on like the conceptual, final, just this kind of the
Procedural.
process
I
of
think so,
that,
too. I'm
and
kind of-
then.
there seems like there's a lot of steps that I'm like, okay, what step are we at now?
So like just,
Yeah.
like maybe we just take subdivisions, you mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, here's procedure for
Particularly
subdivisions.
subdivisions,
Okay.
Or site plans even, or.
and site
yeah.
plans, yeah,
then-
plats.
Well, maybe we can do one on subdivision, one on site
Yeah.
plans.
And then like
That makes
conditional
sense.
use permits, like where do those tie into all that as well?
That's on our list of things to do. Change, fix the conditional use permit ordinance.
Yeah, and then, I mean, it seems like sometimes we'll see the same thing multiple times, but it's like, okay, is there any way we can like streamline that?
Well, yeah, and that's something that we'll discuss internally. I think with what the state legislature did, and I call it a fracture, but they kind of fractured the processes. They've made it a little more complicated, but then you have to figure out how to try to make it efficient, even though they've kind of made it more complicated. So we're not the only city. I think all of the cities are dealing with the fracture and how to deal with the fallout of the fracture, because the process is very different. Even we talked to a developer yesterday, and he said, every city, all they're now saying is talking about application.
Complete
Complete
application.
application is the new buzzword, because all the cities are struggling with, how do we deal with this new fractured behavior for all these things, whereas before it was more uniform and streamlined. So we're all still figuring out, I guess, is the point of
Yeah,
it.
it's all so new.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll come back with that on another agenda and go over specific goals, but just start thinking about what you want to work on, so.
All right, and then I guess we're going to turn the time back over to you for Community Development Director's Report.
Yeah, I have a
Oh,
couple.
we're going to turn that over to Mike.
Yeah, I have a couple of things for that. It's not in your packet, but the biggest thing, like Whitney has been alluding to, we did just recently get an advertisement posted for a general plan update. So that's on the city website. It's out for circulation. I also worked with the WFRC to get a list of what they call statement of qualifications, firms that have submitted who would be willing to do a general plan update. And pre-screen those and sent out specific invitations to 7 of them that were on that list that I thought would be qualified. So we'll see how that fares. The goal or the hope is to get everybody's application either by email, PDF, or in hard copy 2 weeks from last Friday. That's the deadline by 5. So we'll know better at that point what we have. If we don't feel like we have enough or good enough ones, then clearly we would probably extend that deadline. But if we feel like we have enough to work with, what will happen then will be there'll be a screening committee that will be driven probably internally with staff. And the mayor has already indicated to me he wants to be part of that screening committee. And so that's what the next step will be. And then we'll go through that process. And then as we get closer and closer, we'll have probably a weighted graded criteria that we'll use to identify which would be the best. And then we'll be working with Lisa and trying to figure out what the best way to contract with them is and all that fun thing those fun steps to ratify that. So I guess what I'm saying is I could see kickoff being sometime in maybe late April, early May, as far as the actual general plan itself. That's the hope, to buy us at least 2 months worth of process to try to expend monies from this fiscal cycle as efficiently as possible. So that's the goal. And they usually general plan updates can take anywhere between 11 to 18, 19 months. It really just depends on how the public participation is going, how well the contractor's doing, what they need to do expeditiously, what kind of information we are or aren't providing them. I mean, they're fairly fluid. And even just the size of the general plan needs for a community. Some communities have more recent general plans, so it's not as weighty, but some cities that haven't done it in a while, it's kind of like starting over with some very limited pieces from the previous plan or the previous documents, but the community has changed so much that they really are starting over. Those are gonna be much larger and more burdensome. So it'll be interesting to see how they evaluate what the need of Centerville is in light of all those factors. We'll know that as we go. The only other things I would note is, aside from general plan, at the next city council meeting, we will have on there, like we've been talking about, the fencing standard and the cannabis amendment. Both of those will be on there. And again, if you wanna, you're welcome to watch a rousing, follow-up, budget discussion tomorrow night. If you wanna get online, it is broadcast on Zoom, so you're welcome to watch. It starts promptly at 5:30. I believe the discussions will be police, public utilities with the public works, RDAs, and then there's a light personnel discussion, I believe. So if you're curious, as a residents of the community or someone asks you, that's what's going on tomorrow. They can always come here too in person if they're really that motivated. Anybody can. And then other than that, we are having discussions. We talked about this a little bit before the meeting started, but just put on the record, we are having discussions with developers of a lot of properties in the community that have struggled to, I guess, move forward or be discussed. The theory might be that because the transitioning in the community development director position, that these individuals are coming kind of out of their previous positions to try to retest the development of their properties and see what the city's response to that test will be. So we are seeing that more and more currently, but we'll keep you updated as things become more real in the form of either conceptual site plan requests and or preliminary subdivisions, those sorts of things. So yeah, I think that'd be everything, unless I missed anything that either of you two know about.
I just have two quick questions for you.
Yeah.
So how old is our general plan?
I don't even know.
1995.
There you go.
Okay.
Parts of it have been updated.
That's true.
Parts are very
They probably would
old,
be.
like some of the residential discussions in general, but we've adopted a new foothills management section. We've adopted a new moderate income housing component. So some of it's a year old and some of it's 20.
And Lisa and I have talked about it a little bit. I've always been of the opinion in training that a general plan is a guiding planning document, not so much as a legislative directive tool. I think in talking to Lisa a little bit, it sounds like the current general plan is more of a directive or even a legislative tool that has some legal weight. I don't know that that's the right direction or approach to take, so we may do it a little differently. Again, given as we discussed, I don't want to commit us to anything because I don't know what it's going to look like, but the way that I think we should address the general plan is to treat it like a long-range planning document with very clear direction, because the state legislature is trying to use those more and more as a heavy legislative tool. And until they do that, I think it's better for us to have a little bit of limited flexibility within the nature of that general plan as a balloon plan rather than a directive document. That's what your zoning code and your city codes are for, is to be directive and very clear. So the other thing I would note on the general plan, I saw this when I recently just did an update in Riverdale before I came here. It got approved, and some of those elements of the existing general plan may no longer be relevant elements that have any use for the city going forward. So you may see things that in 95 they thought was really useful and relevant data for land use and for guidance, but today there'll be no use for that section, so it no longer will be a part of the general plan. And then you may see new sections that are way more relevant today, like water-wise standards. That's something that actually we're required by state law to have in the general plan. And so, but old general plans don't even have anything about water-wise uses, so that kind of shows the fluidity of even how these plans work.
And then once that gets updated, will it come to the commission for like a vote?
You'll actually be very involved in the discussion and the planning process.
That was my
I was-
question
yeah, I
too.
was kinda-
What is our part?
You'll actually be
in
very
that?
participant in it.
Well, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you touched on the budget thing. So
Oh,
in the
yeah.
budget, there's more funds for planning commission training
Yeah.
and more funds, because you likely will be attending more meetings during
Yeah.
that general plan process. We'll probably have some special meetings. So there's some more funding in there as well for those extra meetings.
You kind of become, in a way, planning sponsors of the effort in trying to get the word out and trying to get, because what a general plan does is it seeks opportunities for event opportunities or open houses to get public input, right? And so you almost become informal sponsors to try to drive that communication to the public at large, like, this is really important. If you care about, I don't want to say if you care about community, but if you'd like to have your input for something that will last for 20-plus years, you definitely want to be a part of this process. This is that opportunity. You may not get a good, clean opportunity like this for another 10, 15, 20 years. So it does matter. And so you become definitely influencers in your own local community that way. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Are staff done?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just want to review the minutes then, to review and approve the minutes from last meeting.
Any changes on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7? And then page 8? No amendments? Okay.
Good work on who writes these. Who is, you said it's
Her name's Katie Rust.
Yeah, and she asked staff to do a quick look over it as well, and we catch what little things we see, and
So we need a motion to approve the notes or the minutes from last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the planning commission minutes of meeting Wednesday, March 13th, 2024.
I second that motion.
Okay, so Sean made a motion to approve and Amanda seconded the motion. Okay, and then we need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, you need to call a vote.
call the question.
You're doing good. You can vote all at once on this.
All right.
You did repeat the motion, though, so that was good.
Yeah.
I'm listening, I'm just trying to get it all in place. All right, we'll vote at the same time to approve the minutes.
1,
2, 3. Aye. Okay, it has been approved
Good.
unanimously.
Good.
Okay, so, and then we need a motion to adjourn. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I will make the motion to adjourn.
I second that motion.
Okay,
All in favor?
all in favor? Aye. Aye. Peace out.